What's up, guys and gals? My name is Joe Banofsky from JNS Entertainment. Welcome back to my channel. If you're not already subscribed here, I would really love it if you would hit that subscribe button and maybe click that bell. During these boring days of sitting at home, quarantined, I'm going to try and push out a lot more content. I've got about 3 videos right now already in the can. Just to give you a preview of a couple of them that are coming up, I'm doing a revised version, a 2020 version of Wedding DJ Survival Kit. That was by far my most popular video on my channel with over 30,000 views. But it's a couple of years old now, so some things have changed. But this video is going to be all about microphones, how to use them, how to pick them, how to set them up, and how to avoid that dreaded feedback. There's a lot of guys that talk on the online forums and say, I'm using a lavalier microphone like this, and for my wedding ceremonies, and no matter what I do, I can't get rid of the feedback. Well, there are some things you can do, and there are some things you cannot overcome, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those things. We're going to start off this video first by talking about the different types of microphones and why you select them. Then we're going to talk about, specifically when it comes to lavalier microphones, how you configure them. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how you set them up with your mixer for the best possible sound and the least amount of feedback. So with that, let's get started, and we'll talk about the different types of microphones. So what we've got right here, I'm going to kneel down in front of this table. I've got a selection of microphones out here. And what you need to know, there are 2 primary types of microphones. There are dynamic microphones and there are condenser microphones. There are other types, but those are the 2 most common, so we'll leave it at that. So what is the difference between a dynamic microphone such as a Shure SM58, which I'm sure everybody who's watching this is familiar with, and say a condenser microphone like one of these overhead mics or this lectern mic right here. So a condenser microphone needs phantom power. Most DJ consoles don't offer phantom power, so you wouldn't use those in any sort of performance. Usually you think of condenser microphones as large diaphragm microphones. They're used in studio recording, podcasts, things like that. There are other uses for a condenser microphone, such as what I just mentioned. If you're doing a pair of overhead mics on a drum kit in an XY configuration, or this, I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is what is known as a lectern mic or a podium mic. Those require phantom power. Basically, they're very, very, very sensitive microphones. So in most live situations, it's where you're broadcasting that sound to a live audience. They're typically not your best choice, as far as in a performance situation anyway. So right here we have your typical dynamic. So the next thing we're going to talk about actually is the pickup pattern. So you have omnidirectional, cardioid, and supercardioid. This SM57, this is a cardioid microphone. It picks up most of what it reproduces from in front of the mic and only a little bit from behind the mic. Okay? This is a version of that microphone. This is the Beta 58. That is supercardioid. So it's going to be more directional than, say, this omnidirectional mic right here. What we have here, I know there's a lot of Ford versus Chevy with Sennheiser versus Shure. I prefer Sennheiser. The reason I have this microphone here, this is a Sennheiser E945. This is supercardioid, so very, very directional, offers a nice smooth sound, and that would be equivalent to like a Beta 58 or a Beta 87. Very similar microphone. Obviously we have wireless mics, which that's a whole different category. We'll talk about that in a minute. This right here is what is known as a boundary mic. This is not a great quality one, but this has a basically a hemispherical pickup pattern. So this microphone, if placed on the ground or on a stage, is essentially going to pick up everything in a plane like this around it. So that's something that somebody might want to experiment with as well for a wedding ceremony, but it's got to be in the right situation. The old standby, the Shure SM57. This is a dynamic microphone that really can deal with high SPLs before it reaches any distortion. So you often see these used when miking instrument cabinets and things like that for bands. It also is not a bad vocal mic either. So enough about all of these excuse me, conventional microphones. You guys are really here for the discussion about lavalier microphones. So right now I am wearing a Sennheiser lavalier microphone. Many of you are familiar with this. This is a EW300G3 system, and I'm using the microphone that comes with it, which is the Sennheiser ME2. It's an omnidirectional microphone. So a lot of guys say, well, why don't we use an ME4, which is more directional, and that will offer us less feedback. Well, on paper that may sound true, but actually it's not true. When someone is wearing a highly directional mic like the ME4, they suffer very badly from proximity effect. So if somebody was to turn their head to the side, there would be a big drop in sound, whereas the ME2, which is an omnidirectional mic, that is not the case. So let's talk about microphone choices. These are ME2s. This is an ME4. I'm wearing an ME2. These are the microphones that come with these kits. They're not great. I mean, you're spending, for a kit like this, we're going to pause this video. I'm going to show you an example. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. The magic of video. What I've got on the table are a couple of different microphone kits that many of you may be familiar with. This, we have your typical Sennheiser system, and I've got a few of these. So for those of you not familiar with what this is called a plug-on transmitter. In the industry, there's an industry joke called that these are referred to as the butt plugs. So I didn't mention this mic, for instance. This is a Electro Voice RE50B. This is the industry standard for broadcasting, for broadcast journalists. So how many times are you watching the news and you see this? Almost always. That leads me to my next point. How often do you see a rock concert performer wearing a lavalier lapel microphone? Never. Microphones like this are intended for recording. That's why I have this system labeled, this is my 500 megahertz ENG system. So ENG stands for electronic news gathering. And these kits are marketed that way as ENG kits. So you'll very often see your news anchors using these style microphones. That's their intended use. They're not really great for live performance. This happens to be the kit that I bring most often with me to do wedding ceremonies. So what microphones am I using during wedding ceremonies? Well, I'm not using the microphone that came with these. they're great in a situation like for what I'm doing right now. That's why I'm wearing an ME2 right now. But for live performances, they're not really so great. This is a microphone that works optionally with the with any Sennheiser, and you can get it where you can get this same microphone with a mini BNC that works for the Shure systems, and I know they sell this for the AKG systems as well. What makes this a little bit better than the typical mic that comes with it is you have a host of different mounting options for starters. This microphone can be worn on the body, under clothing. This microphone can be worn using the Dracula spike. It could be worn with a tie tack. It has a clip and obviously has a windscreen. This is a very high quality microphone. It goes for, I believe they're around $300. So with microphones, you do absolutely get what you pay for. So a microphone like this is going to be miles better than a microphone that comes with your middle of the road kit. Now a microphone like this, now we're jumping into a totally different league. This is a Countryman. I believe this one is an E6. Yes, this is an E6 directional microphone, head-worn mic. If you could convince your efficient to wear this microphone, it's going to put you miles ahead of where you were as far as offering feedback or feedback control. So with any of these microphones, you have so much more headroom. You're so much less prone to feedback with a handheld microphone than you are with one of these. These are so sensitive because they're trying to pick up everything around them that your chances for feedback are far higher with a lavalier microphone in a live performance than they are with a handheld. So one of the keys is microphone positioning. The reason that this Countryman works so well is because the microphone is literally right next to the orator's mouth. So whoever is speaking, this microphone is right near their mouth. You don't have to push the gain so hard, which is ultimately what's going to give you feedback. So this is just a little introduction to different microphones. So step one, the point of that was just to sort of educate anybody who doesn't know on the differences between some of the microphones, and also to try and inform you that the microphone that came with your microphone kit, it's probably not that great unless you spent a ton of money on your microphone. So microphones I recommend. This Voice Technologies VT500, I love it. A Sennheiser MKE2 Gold, I have one of those. I would put that on par with this Countryman E6. That's just a lavalier style. And Countryman makes lavalier styles too. So this is a great mic. This is a great mic. The Sennheiser MKE2 Gold, great microphone. These ME2s and ME4s, not so great. So next, let's talk about how to set up your microphone for optimal performance. And then we'll talk about how to set up your mixer. Okay, so what I have here is the microphone receiver that I'm actually wearing right now, or the microphone transmitter. This is the microphone receiver, and this is what's recording us right now. So step one, when you're looking at these microphones, let's see how well we do here. They all have a menu. Now, depending on the brand of your microphone, it's going to be different, and depending on the quality of your microphone, some of these features may not be available. So the first one that's very important on the transmitter itself is the sensitivity setting. Now, if you screw this up, that's the first weak link in the chain. You're doomed from the start. So these settings should be set according to the microphone and the manufacturer's specifications. So the microphone I'm wearing, the Sennheiser recommends that for the ME2, you have your sensitivity set at -12 decibels, okay? So we can go through all the different things. I'm not going to talk to you about scanning for channels and how to configure everything else on here. There's really only a couple of settings that can really dramatically affect your sound quality, and sensitivity is the biggest one. So we have sensitivity here, and that should be set according to the microphone you're using and the situation you're in, and the microphone placement. So after that, we move on to the receiver. This has a couple of settings as well. So the most important setting for getting good sound quality on this one, squelch. A lot of guys don't know what that is. I'll just take a moment. Setting your squelch to low, medium, or high. What is the difference there? So squelch is what prevents all the static from going through your speakers if somebody was to turn this microphone off. The higher your squelch setting here, the less likely you are to ever hear that noise, but the more likely you are to cut down your range. The lower you have the squelch set, the more likely you are to, or I should say the less likely you are to hear the noise if your squelch is set to high. If your squelch is set to low, you're more likely to hear the noise, but you'll get better range. So it's sort of a balancing act there. But if we go into easy setup, no, we don't want easy setup. We want audio frequency out. So what does that mean? Well, we're all familiar with microphone level and line level, etc. So this gives us the ability to either attenuate the signal if it's too strong, I just dropped it by 6 decibels, or increase the power of the signal. So you may say, great, if I crank up that signal, then I'll have more power at the point of my mixer. So here, if we're looking at this recording device, look at the view meter as I'm talking in a normal tone of voice, and I just dropped it down 6 decibels. And now I'm going to pick it up 6 decibels, and you see I'm peaking. So we don't want to peak. I don't know what this sounds like, but this section of the video will probably have some distortion in it. So as a general rule of thumb, this should be set at 0. The only reason you would want to attenuate this signal is if there's something really overpowering happening. And the only reason you would want to boost it up is if you're trying to compensate for something, but generally something is set wrong in the first place. So you'll notice I have my recording level set right in the middle on this channel 1 of this recorder. It's set between 4 and 5. This is set at 0, and this is set at -12, which is what the manufacturer recommends for this microphone. So in this situation, everything is set up perfectly. Peaking out right around 0 dB, actually right around -3 dB, which is where you want to. You just want to tickle the red, they say. So here we are in this recording, just tickling the red. I'm usually in the yellow, most of the time in the orange. So this is set up perfectly. My gain is set to unity gain here at 0. The level meter on this microphone is just tickling the top as I'm talking, as it is here. So as I talk, that's just sort of bouncing right at the top of the peak level. So I'm sending a perfectly clean signal. It's not distorted. It's not, flying up to the top and staying there. That's the same thing we're receiving here. It's just staying, the peaks are coming close to 0, maybe touching 0, and that's exactly where you want it. And the same thing is true here. So obviously we're talking about broadcasting, not recording, but it's kind of the same thing. So now that we've talked about how to configure this microphone so that you're not feeding any distortion, we'll move on to the next phase and we'll talk about what would be different between this recorder and, say, a mixer. Okay, so laid out on this table, I have a few different mixers that may look familiar to many of you, and I'm going to talk about the differences between them. This is what is known as a field mixer. I use mixers like these in my wedding ceremony system, and these are just simple 4-channel microphone mixers. Some are 3-channel. Very little control on this one. There's just your channel gains and your master, okay? So basically this is gain versus attenuation. So we've already talked about how you have to have your transmitter, so that's not peaking, your receiver, so that's not peaking, and you have to decide how much signal you're going to send out to your mixer. If you're going into a microphone channel, you'll determine through the view meters whether you need to boost up the voltage, the AF out, on your receiver, depending on the gains depending on the view meter you're seeing on your individual channel. So this is as basic as it gets. It's not going to give you much control. There's no tone control, no EQ. So moving up from that, this is a professional microphone mixer. It's a little bit better than the one I just showed you. This one actually has shelving, so you can roll off your lows, or it has a low end EQ and shelving. So depending on how you adjust these two, you can roll off your highs, increase your highs, reduce your highs, or roll off your lows. That'll prevent some rumble, some wind noise, things like that. So, but again, very basic. Here are your channel volume controls, for lack of a better word, and here's your master volume. So if you get into a mixer like this, this is a popular one that a lot of DJs use. Also, there are the UI series, which is sort of a competitor to this. You have a little bit more control, but instead of firing this up, I'm going to go to an old school analog mixer, and this may make it a little easier to explain. So here on many mixers, this may be a slider up and down, and then you have gain, and then you have your main. So what to make of all of this? I've got a volume level, for lack of a better word, with the sensitivity setting on my transmitter. I've got an audio frequency out level on my receiver. I've got a channel volume, I've got a gain, I've got a master, and to make things even more interesting, this is going to be sent off to a powered speaker that also has a volume level. So holy cow, there's a lot of things to go wrong here. The most important thing is making sure your levels always stay out of the red. So you never want to see clipping anywhere in your signal path. So right now, this signal going into this recorder is absolutely perfect. So if I was to replicate that going into this channel, I'm going to start with my channel volume down, my main level down, and this gain right in the middle. Or I could even start with that down. So let's talk about how to stage this. And then my main output out of this is going to go off to my speaker. So best way to configure this. Let's start with your powered speaker. Say it's a QSC, an EV, whatever. Have the volume level for the channel you're plugging into set to the appropriate output you're giving. So if your main out of here is a line level output, that's 4 volts, make sure your speaker is set to line. If you're using a microphone mixer like this, where it may send a mic level signal out, make sure it's set to mic level. So your speaker volume, I would leave that exactly in the middle, 12 o'clock position. So here we have this volume all the way down, this gain all the way down, and our master all the way down. So for starters, one of the ways that I like to set up my gain structure is I'll start by putting the channel volume pretty much where I think it's going to be for the performance. Let's just say right in the middle. Okay. So all this is, if you look closely, which I don't have my reading glasses on, so I can't see that well, is this is attenuating the signal or boosting the signal. So there, that's 10 dB. So this, even this basic Alesis mixer has a peak level indicator on it. So on this channel, so I could see when I'm clipping that channel. So if I have this in the middle and I'm talking into my microphone, I am going to start turning up this gain little by little until I see that peak light start just touching at the highs. So once I get it so that it's just touching at the highs, I have this where I want it, which is right in the middle, and this gain, I'm adjusting this until I start to peak, and then I'm just going to pull it back a little bit. Okay, so now I have the structure for this channel, pretend this microphone is on this channel, set absolutely perfectly. So then my master volume is going to control the volume level to go out to the speaker. And I know that once it gets to the final output phase of this mixer, it's still a clean signal that's not clipping. Okay, so what about feedback? What is causing feedback? And how could we fix it? Well, this is very old. You can still find these on Facebook. This is a feedback eliminator system, but we're not going to talk about this too much. There's that. If you're using a high-end digital mixer like this, these have algorithms in them that can help control feedback. A mixer like this is a parametric equalizer and a third octave graphic equalizer. So with the equalization, you could pull back on the treble frequencies where you know that you're getting feedback. But feedback is really a separate beast, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit, and then I'm going to wrap up this video because I know it's getting a little bit long. Okay, so in order to conquer feedback, you sort of have to know what it is and why it's happening. To visualize feedback, imagine when you're a kid, if you've ever gone into a fun house and you look at that mirror and you see it goes on forever. You can recreate that parallax effect by putting a mirror in front of a mirror and looking into it, and it'll look like it goes on forever. That's very similar in light waves to what's happening with sound waves in your feedback. So you have a presenter or a speaker or an officiant or whomever who is talking into a microphone. You are then broadcasting that signal out through a speaker. Depending on what microphone choice you made and where your speaker is pointed and what frequencies are coming back, that microphone might be hearing some of what you're broadcasting out, just at a slight delay, because sound takes time to travel through the air. And then it hears those frequencies that are making it back and rebroadcasting, and so on and so on and so on, and it starts happening so fast that it creates a tone. So that's why feedback usually starts quiet and it ramps up until it's out of control and somebody's running for the volume, because you're feeding back more and more and more of the sound that you're picking up. So the goal is to create as much headroom as possible by having the microphone. Notice where I have this microphone placed. It's only about, 6 inches away from my mouth. If you have a microphone way down here, that's no good. You want it really close, and that's why the head-worn mics work so well, because the presenter, it has the microphone right here, and it's literally picking up their voice at a very loud level, so you could have those gains pulled way back compared to a microphone here or a microphone here. Think of it when a groom is making a speech at a wedding and he's a little bashful and he's got the microphone way down here, and you're on that level, you're trying to get it as high as it can go, and then all of a sudden you hear that ring in the room, and you got to pull it back and nobody can hear him. That's why we tell everybody, swallow the mic, keep it right up to your mouth. I mean, you look at musicians, their lips are literally touching that microphone on a regular basis. So ways to eliminate feedback, a lot of it is just simple education. Get that microphone as close to their mouth as you can. It may not be optimal, but that's what you need to do. Get your speakers pointed in the opposite direction and in front. If you put your speakers behind them, you're heightening the chance that that microphone is going to pick up sound coming out of the speakers, and you'll create feedback. So those two things are important. And you watch the forums and you see people all the time say, it's your speaker placement, it's your speaker placement. And yeah, oftentimes it is, but a lot of times it's refraction. It's sound coming back off the speaker. Like I said, this is the worst case scenario for a live performance. They just don't work well. You're not going to always be able to get rid of all feedback in all scenarios. So the key takeaway is microphone placement as close to the mouth as possible. Speaker placement, definitely facing away from the person wearing the mic. Don't forget, most of us are using plastic speakers nowadays. The cases vibrate. There is sound going backwards. All speakers have sound waves that are going backwards. And there is sound reflecting off of chairs and guests and whatnot coming back to whoever's wearing the microphone. So refracted sound, you're not always going to be able to completely eliminate it. And that's why, microphones such as a lapel microphone can cause troubles. All you could do is mitigate it the best you can. Yes, I showed you fancy electronics that you can use, and they work great. I mean, the feedback suppression in that QSC Touch Mix 16 that I have, it's nothing short of amazing. You turn that microphone on, you hit that wizard, it goes through, it finds every frequency and locks them out. EQing can work. It takes some practice. You really need to know what you're doing when you're dealing with an EQ, especially a third octave graphic equalizer, because the goal is to cut down on the treble frequencies without coloring the sound too much, and that could be challenging if you're just starting out or having never done that before. So with that, I hope I sort of talked to you a little bit about, I hope I taught you something, first of all. I'm just sharing, my best practice. Oh, one thing I did forget to mention, and maybe I mentioned it earlier, I'm not sure, but the difference between a directional mic and an omnidirectional mic in a lav. I think I did mention it, but as far as feedback is concerned, a directional mic is not always better than an omnidirectional mic. A lot of people think it is, and they think it should be. It's just in real world practice, when you're dealing with lavalier microphones, that has just not been proven to be the case. It's almost a 50-50 split. So if you were to swap out an ME2 for an ME4 in the same situation, and the ME2 is feeding back, the ME4 might feed back too. There's just so many variables there. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sorry it's a little long. Stay tuned. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do so, and please hit that like button as well, and look out for probably going to be doing a video every day or two for the next week or two. And with that, I hope we all get back to work soon, because sitting at home sucks. Peace, everybody.